Kia ora koutou and welcome back to our fabulous little studio here in AUT. Now, Graeme and I have already given quite a bit of background on the Digital Industry Transformation Plan. We've talked about skills, we've talked about the $20 million that was announced in the weekend, and we're here now to talk specifically about the education system and how it aligns with the goals of the Digital Industry Transformation Plan. So we're joined today by Professor Guy Littlefair from AUT. Thank you for hosting us here today for a start. It's been a great space, great environment. Well, this week actually, TV's been here all week. So Guy, do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do for AUT?
Sure, thank you. Perhaps I'll just start by saying it's AUT's privilege to host Tech Week. I came into the university, actually this is my second time into the university, but I came into this particular role in 2017 and got involved in Tech Week, and I just see it's gone from strength to strength, and the more that AUT can do as that University of Technology in New Zealand to support initiatives such as Tech Week, the better really. I've got a couple of roles here. So I'm the Dean of AUT's largest faculty. It's a faculty called the Faculty of Design and Creative Technologies, which brings together design and the arts and architecture with more of the techno-sciences. So I'm also responsible for engineering and computer science. In addition to that, I'm the Pro-Vice Chancellor for International. So I have responsibilities for international marketing, international recruitment, international relations, and the provision of English language to international students. And that particular role has certainly been challenging in the last 2 years.
I can imagine.
As you can imagine, but I've still got a smile on my face, and here today to give some insights and some perspectives, perhaps.
So in the immigration announcements last week, will we be expecting international students back in Aotearoa anytime soon?
Well, fingers crossed. We're still working through the details in the announcement. I was actually in Wellington last week when it came out, and I had some briefings about what we could expect. It's a very strong signal from the government, I believe, that they're prioritising international students. Moving that position forward from October to July is definitely positive. One of the concerns that I have is, whilst there's an announcement, is there going to be the support behind the scenes to actually bring those visas forward and get students here? My suspicion is, in all fairness, it's probably not going to make a significant difference in 2022, but I think that it will line things up better for semester 1 2023.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let's all, fingers crossed, hope, because we know how much the education system has been suffering. Also, many employers have been struggling with that supplementary capability. So I'm really interested in, it's probably hijacking this slightly, but this is the world that I live in at the moment with IT professionals and pathways into the workforce, basically, is what I thought we could start by talking about. Graeme reminded me earlier that there were some woeful stats when we developed the digital skills for a Digital Nation report last year, or digital for Aotearoa, around, what was it, about 1,800 students?
1,800 in 2019, left year 13 and went on into an IT degree level type qualification, started one. So a very small number moving into the system.
So how do we improve that kind of conversion rate from high school education into higher education, and particularly into higher education in digital technology? It must be something that you've been working on here at AUT.
It's a really interesting question. You know, we have definitely been focusing on that, and we have a number of initiatives here with high schools. I think one of the things that we could do collaboratively is actually articulate to young people, what are those routes to employment? What are those career opportunities? Because my PhD is in computer science, so I can say this in all fairness. It does still, I believe, have that perception of being geeks, and I think we've got to get past that. I think we've got to look at how we get minority groups, how we broaden the opportunities for all of our young people to come in to the tertiary sector and then go on into industry. I also think in some ways it's been a bit of a contested space over the years. You know, much of the IT information systems grew out of business schools in universities. That sort of transition now into more of the space around harder core computer science. But maybe it's time to look at, well, what is the middle ground? Actually, what are the skills that industry are looking for? Is it more up at that hardcore end, the AI end of things, or is it a bit more mainstream? Because technology, really, for me, when I look back over the 30 years that I've sort of been involved in technology, what's changed is it used to be a niche. It used to be something that sat over here that got bolted on, but now it's in everything that we do. You know, I jumped on the ferry to come to work this morning, Hopcard, you know, it's all technology based, use my phone all the time. Everything has fundamentally shifted, but I don't know that really young people necessarily quite see it that way and can't see what's behind what's in their hand or what's in their wallet.
Yeah, Graeme, we were just talking about this before, weren't we, in the tech story piece about needing to divert some focus on educating young people. Do you want to just elaborate on that?
Yeah, just to pick up on a previous session today around the tech story, and we've done some great work starting to tell the world that New Zealand's into high tech and it's landing really nicely. Then we turn around at home and we haven't actually told the rest of New Zealand. And NZTech, as an example, tries to try and raise awareness. We comment in the media a lot and trying to put things out, but again, it's just a certain audience that's getting it. And if we want to change the kind of the pathway of students, because if we go back to that data point, that proportion though, that's just a data point, but that proportion. So in the sectors, 2.8% Pacific, 4% Maori in the tech,
25% women,
and 25% women, and but that proportion goes all the way back to research in primary school age, asking if you're interested in it, right? So even if we get a whole bunch of extra really nice pathways, we've still got to work the front end of that pipeline, and to do that, we've got to talk to different people about different things they might be interested in. And to your point, there some tech is at that really hard end, and we still need people to go through and be data scientists and machine learning experts, et cetera, but there's the nice thing about the tech and the jobs that are out there is there's a broad range. You cover the creative side, right? So there's all sorts of design thinking and creative and artistic elements that you can bring into tech roles. And so it's right, I talk about left brain, right brain, you've got the whole mix. And so getting back through things like we were just talking about the $20 million that would be has been announced, a portion of that will be used to develop a domestic tech story to set some leverage the international one to help create sort of a framework and some of the language we can use to better tell the story to New Zealanders, to get them inspired about wanting to be part of this massively fast-growing part of the economy.
So, in thinking about that and thinking about how we attract people from different backgrounds into our industry, so it really is reflective of our society. What's the role of in this change in education of micro-credentials and curating your own learning, and how does that fit alongside mainstream education? And I'm putting you on the spot here because it wasn't in the brief, but have you been, as a department, starting to think about how to embrace some of these modern, different ways of learning?
Well, thanks for putting me on the spot, and that's fine. It is something that all universities are looking at. You know, we tend to bandy around that term lifelong learning, and I do believe that post the pandemic, although we're not quite through it yet, the world has fundamentally shifted. I think the move to so many people having to work at home and rely on that technology to be able to do that has shifted people's thinking, and I believe it's shifted so fundamentally that universities need to respond appropriately. What we're working on at the moment is understanding what the more mature market would wish to have in terms of opportunities for upskilling. We've recently gone into partnership with a provider, the Institute of Data, who have expertise. They've done a lot of work in Australia with some of the universities of tech there in terms of providing packaged short courses which do give that micro-credential, which we can then dovetail into a longer-term either undergraduate or postgraduate degree here. I think that the university sector is going to also have to respond in terms of the way in which we deliver our courses. So, most universities, there's a couple of exceptions, but most universities are still very much about bricks and mortar, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. How does that really accommodate the mature market? Online education, distance education, cloud-based education, whatever we wish to call it, is certainly a route. It's certainly an avenue, but it's not easy. It's not easy. In my experience from overseas at a university I worked in that was very heavily into the distance education was that students didn't get the experience they anticipated. It was very lonely for them, and a journey that was ultimately difficult, and the attrition rates, the percentage of students that actually dropped out along the way is relatively high in distance. So what can we do? How can we blend what we do on campus with what the opportunity is for the off campus? So opportunities around VR and AR to augment our delivery system. AUT at the moment is going through a sort of once in a generation change around our learning management system. So the way in which we digitally interface our courses, the way in which students engage with us, we're updating and modernising all of that we do. So I believe we're positioning ourselves quite well.
Nice. And I guess it's not just the mature market that we need to address. I had a couple of Gen Zs here this morning talking about what's important to them. It's also these digital natives who are going to be entering education, or already are, and increasingly so. And how do you kind of not only reach down and pull them through to higher education, but retain them through some different work practices?
It's interesting, actually. A former Vice-Chancellor of mine, Jane Den Hollander, she was once asked about the term STEM. And she said, actually, I don't like the term STEM because it starts with science. When many young women think about STEM, they identify with science and they choose to go down the biology route. So they tick the STEM box in their heads. And that's admirable. That's probably perfectly fine. But the reality is, if you go at high school down that biology route and avoid the maths and the technology, it's unlikely that you'll ever be able to study tertiary and then transition into employment in that tech space. So I always much prefer to talk about technology. We've established a position in my faculty that Marsa holds, which is around women in tech, to try and articulate what tech is, but through the lens of young women.
That's really brilliant because, I say this all the time. I didn't work with another woman for the first 10 years of my career, and I worked with a lot of propeller-head, stereotypical smelly men who chain smoked and drank 7 black coffees a day for that first 10 years of my career, and it's incredibly disheartening for me to hear from a lot of other young women that they find our industry still not attractive to them. So I guess just to change tack slightly, Graeme, one of the things that you and I have been in a lot of meetings I've been in this role for 8 weeks, so in the last 8 weeks, where NZTech and ITP collaborate together with TEC, Ministry of Education, and Toimai particularly, the Workforce Development Council. One of the big hot topics has been work integrated learning, and do you just want to elaborate a bit on what we've been talking about there?
Yeah, I was thinking that when Guy was chatting, I was going, actually, you've got those two elements of on campus and off campus, and I said the third rung to that stool now really needs to be work integrated, elements as well. And we're kind of seeing this evolution from where that was kind of considered something that would be done in a more of a trade-based environment, and yet it's not that different to being a doctor or a health professional who have that kind of thing. So it's making that sort of transition that even in this sort of digital space, that having that experience as you go through is useful, and yet the whole system hasn't really been set up for it. So one of the things that we've been, I guess, discussing with the change in the sort of the polytech space and also through Toimai, which is the organisation that's supposed to help develop the programs of learning that feed into that system, is this, all the research is saying that the bits that are missing is the work experience. And so how do we help the education system as it's developing have the connection into the industry. The challenge we've got, which we can talk about separately, is actually it's quite hard for the companies to change because they aren't used to it as well. But this being an education conversation, it'd be quite interesting to see. It'd be nice to know that it's not just being parked in that sort of level 4, level 5 space, but it's actually it's something that you're considering or you've seen or have any insight in the university space.
Sure. So, funnily enough, I was having a conversation with our Vice Chancellor, our new Vice Chancellor yesterday, and we traversed some of this. International best practice in the tech space is for undergraduate degrees to be augmented with work-integrated learning.
Yeah.
I think locally the standout for me would be University of Technology in Sydney. So if you wish to study an undergraduate computer science degree or an undergraduate engineering degree there, you have to do the extra year, and that extra year is split up into 2 6-month blocks where you spend time in industry working. You get paid for that, but it's also credit bearing. So when you graduate with a degree, but you also graduate with a diploma in professional practice, which really credentials you to be ready to go into employment. We're contemplating that approach here at AUT as well. The obstacle I see, and you did sort of touch on this, Graeme, the obstacle that I see is I think that the industry is going to have to reframe the way in which it views universities. Because I think traditionally, to put it crudely, they've relied on the university delivering a product. They pick that product up in terms of employing the individual, and then they take them through, and they may well go through their own internal training program or whatever mechanism they have to induct them into the organisation. If we're going to be successful in moving in this path, and I think for a small connected country like New Zealand, there's no reason why we can't, it is going to be much more around a partnership between employers and the universities and coming together to support our students and turn them into graduates that go on and can contribute very early in their careers.
Yeah, well, I couldn't agree more. And I think one of the silver linings to the COVID cloud was the fact that this pressure on jobs, on skills access, has reformatted the thinking for a lot of organisations. We don't have the solutions yet or how to respond to it, but even as the borders are reopening up, we're still getting organisations that are leaning into initiatives, not just education initiatives. I'll give you an example. We're running a program at the moment, we're not running it, we're supporting a program that's being run by Ministry of Social Development called Sisters in Tech, and oversubscribed on the company side for the number of, I think there's 50-odd young Pacifica Māori women who, partway through training and then went off and had to, get a job because they needed to, are being provided work experience while getting an additional training. So we've had a really good response from industry just over the last few weeks, just as an example of companies that are actually going, we need to be part of this now. The work that's happening that we've been just talking about with Toi Mai and the industry development and that side of things, again, companies are really interested in this work integrated learning and how do we actually kind of co-design it in a way that you can understand how complex it is in our business and we can understand how the system works, but kind of get that mix right. So I think the timing's right. And I've heard good things about as well the apprenticeship degree up in the UK area as well. So using that same sort of philosophy of, and I love it because I don't know if many people know this, but I trained many years ago as a pharmacist. So the amount of time you had in pharmacies while you were training, just a couple of weeks at the start, but by the last year you had a year in a paid internship. But the pharmacies all reached out for these graduates to bring into their intern year because they could get like a qualified pharmacist at a really affordable rate, and then they had a program of activities for them to do, so that by the time maybe 3 months into it, they knew they could take the weekend off because there was someone who'd reached that level, and so it was kind of mutual benefits there, and everyone was a win-win. And I think that's something that can definitely be produced here in New Zealand, like you say, a small place.
No, I completely agree. In the last 12 months in particular, when I've been talking to CEOs and other senior leaders in industry, you know, the traditional practice in New Zealand has been, if there's a shortage of talent, let's go offshore. Let's just bring people in. Of course, the last 2 years that's just not been possible. People have exited, and there's been huge gaps. And I do agree, Graeme. I think that you know, there has been a shift. I think that people are starting to realise we need to invest more in skills within New Zealand before we perhaps think about flying people in.
Yeah, I think it's definitely, like, I'm going to advocate for the immigration side of things as well, because it's a hard slog, and I want to make sure anyone who might be involved in that hears that it's still very important, but it's getting that balance right. The balance tilted too far. We did a really good job of promoting New Zealand. People wanted to come and work here, and you know, the stats are we'd create 4,500 to 5,500 new jobs a year. 3,500 to 4,500 of those would go through the immigration pipeline. So let's rebalance it, basically, because we still need those good, and they're good to come in and help with the education as well, right? So, but getting more pathways.
No, you know, don't get me wrong. It is about identifying the best of both and making both work. You know, what's interesting for me, having lived in different jurisdictions around the world, one thing that I don't think New Zealand plays up enough is how good our universities are. You know, all of our 8 universities are ranked in the top 3% in the world. I don't know another nation that can actually make claim to that. So what is the university sector doing in terms of working with industry, partnering up, making sure that there are the opportunities, whether that's through formalised work integrated learning or whether it's through more ad hoc summer scholarships or summer studentships. I see nothing but opportunity,
so
really.
We've got 5 minutes left. You've got 2 of the biggest industry groups represented here. Mine, IT Professionals, represents the individuals that work in the industry, and Graeme's that represents the companies. What can we do together collectively? Because rather than you needing to go out and speak to every company yourselves, we have this fabulous channel that we can get that reach. Let's try and solution in our last now 4.5 minutes.
Nail it.
Well,
yeah.
I'm an engineer, so I'm all about finding the solution. I think it would be really good for us to start off with a common narrative. You know, what's a shared narrative that we can develop from an employer's perspective, from a university's perspective, and let's make it the whole tertiary perspective, because, you know, whilst we are in competition with one another, we're also all in the waka together.
You're also doing a very good job, I would have to say, at really specialising in different areas, so that while you are in competition, you're not necessarily competing head to head, which I'm really respectful of.
Yeah, just to bring it back to the reality is that we're still importing thousands of people, right? So it's, even if we could step back for a minute from the competition element, there's still the competition is immigration. And if we could find a way to take up 20-30% more of that, then everyone's a winner. If we could find a way to encourage more people in and then pathway them through multiple systems, like if we could double or triple the number that come in through your school, and it does the same for every other school, then why wouldn't you want to try and do it together?
Everyone benefits.
So common narrative. I've got an action out of this that if I got a deal for you, we've got some consultation out around reskilling and upskilling at the moment that I'd love. I think some people from your department actually have already contributed to. That's
a good replug.
Yeah, replug for my consultation. ITP.nz, everyone, to find the consultation doc. So forming these kind of strategic relationships, I think, between industry groups who can get the reach out to the wider industry and the sector, I think that's probably a second thing that would be really important. Anything else that from your perspective?
Can I just throw one in there? Because we talked about it earlier, about that shared language.
Yeah.
So the Sophia framework is the industry transformation plan has landed on, and the government has acquired a national licence to that, so we can all use it. And on the Tipakona side of things, they're looking at how to overlay stuff they're doing with these commons. So there's a common way to, everyone can do their own stuff, but can we have this common way of, as a software engineer of this level of experience? So I think I feel like there's definitely scope to have a look across the degree level or the higher tertiary level mapping element as well, just so that if necessary we can come back to some common points and we can call an apple an apple.
I think completely agree, Graeme. The other thing that I would suggest we do is we actually talk to some of the people that have been through the system and have gone
Good
on.
idea.
You know, let's get some feedback on their experiences of the tertiary, the transition into the workforce, their career development through the workforce, not only from a domestic perspective, but let's also think about pulling in some of those international students that, you know, were courageous enough to come to New Zealand and study in our great universities and then went on and contributed to the economy through being employed. Let's get some feedback on what it was for them.
That's a great idea, and particularly with the diversity element that we were talking about. What about also, I speak to a lot of young women who start in a BSc, not necessarily in yours, but in other universities, and then they find it's a hard slog. They're the only girl in the room, and they often then transition to a different, convert to a different degree. Getting some insight from them around what could be done differently to support them might be useful.
100%.
Yeah. Right, we've got 50 seconds left.
Have we solved the problem?
I think we've got 4 things on our action plan,
Yeah.
so we've made a really good start. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Been my pleasure.
And again for the space and supporting Tech Week. And we're really, really conscious that we don't want to just be speaking to our own echo chamber here and bringing other people in to hearing the conversation about how great tech is really important. You got any last things to say?
No last requests. One last request. Let's do more together.
Agreed.
It's the only way to get it done.
Let's commit to that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you
Fabulous.
both very
Thank
much
you.
for joining me.
Thank you.